Today, we become legends.
Hey, my name's Inter, and welcome back to Inter Games for another banger. Today, we're going to be doing some Reddit review. Basically, some sort of low-effort content. I just want to talk about some stuff that's been posted on Reddit. I feel like this is not really main channel worthy. Although, there will be a pretty cool main channel video coming out today as well on the best of every SMITE World Championship. Been working on that one for a while, so that one should be cool. But today, on Inter Games, we're just going to be reviewing some Reddit posts I've seen recently. There's one here. Is there any chance SMITE 2 can turn away from its LoL gameplay to be more like SMITE? And there's also another one down here that's sort of the opposite of that. There is a creeping sense of disappointment setting in. We are close to something fresh, new, and versatile for SMITE 2, but people want to dumb it down before it's even out. So these are sort of like two sides of the coin, really. And we're going to just be going over the posts themselves, and they've obviously got a ton of comments. Everything about SMITE 2 gets a ton of comments. People have a lot of feelings about it, obviously. And so yeah, let's just jump right in with this first one. So this is from FMK today on Reddit. I was super excited when I heard SMITE 2 was coming out at Worlds. What excited me? Better graphics, newer engine allowing for new gods to be added quickly with crazy abilities, newer engine allowing for a better map, and some kind of update to the MOBA formula, more lanes, less lanes, smaller map, no jungle, more fire giant like camps. Who knows, the sky was the limit, right? And so yeah, I think in the long term we will get these things. You know, I think the graphics at the moment, it's kind of like a style diff, really. Like in some ways they're better, like the actual fidelity and the quality of the like graphics and textures and the lighting and stuff is objectively better in SMITE 2, but they really need to work on it a little bit. They need to stylize it, they need to fix the lighting, which is really bad at the moment in my opinion. But I'm sure as the game like gets developed through its alpha phases and stuff, they'll work on the graphics. And you know, we've all seen how SMITE 1 looked. SMITE 1 looked honestly similar in a way, in that like the lighting was terrible in the early versions of like SMITE 1's alpha. And so I think as the game progresses, by the time it gets to like 24/7 free to play, the graphics will look a lot better. A newer engine allowing for new gods to be added quicker with crazy abilities. This will probably happen as well. You know, Hecate already has some fairly crazy stuff in her kit. She has like those interact teleporters on her ultimate and stuff like that. But I guess it remains to be seen on whether new gods will be added quicker or not. And honestly, if they even want to add new gods quicker, because they've already sort of like slowed down the god releases in SMITE 1. You know, clearly they were capable of releasing a god every 2 weeks in SMITE 1. That's what they did back in the old days, and they made some of their best gods when they were releasing them on like a 2-week schedule. Whereas now we get a new god in SMITE 1. Well, we haven't had one in a while, but previously, before they announced SMITE 2 and cancelled god releases for SMITE 1, we were getting a new god every 2 months. So obviously not anywhere near as quick as we used to. So they are capable of making gods that quickly, and they made some of their best gods that quickly. But I think the reason they slowed them down so much is because they don't want the roster to end up with like 300 different characters, because that's honestly just a little too much. Obviously, more gods is generally more fun. You have more chances to find something that you really enjoy, more chances to bring people in with, you know, pantheons from their culture, or like from pop culture like Cthulhu and stuff like that. But you don't want to get too crazy with it. You don't want 500 characters in the game, because then it's just going to be like no one knows the matchup for any of them. You never see the same god twice. Like, it's just going to be a bit silly. New engine allowing for a better map. This is something that we have not seen yet in SMITE 2. The SMITE 2 map is just so much worse than SMITE 1's map in terms of like the objectives that are available, the camps that are available, the general layout and stuff like that. I think SMITE 2's map is just objectively worse at the moment. That's something they need to work on. You know, we lost a lot of the cool objectives like Pyromancer, like Totem, like silver and gold buff on the sides and stuff like that. And we haven't really gained anything too interesting. Like, yeah, we got the Warhorn, but it's kind of just worse than Totem in my opinion as a solo laner. And then we got the rotating buff camps, but they're not that interesting either. Could maybe be replaced with something more interesting. So I think the map definitely needs a bit of work. Some kind of update to the MOBA formula. More lanes, less lanes, smaller map, no jungle, more fire giant like camps. Who knows, the sky's the limit, right? This we haven't really seen at all, and I'm not sure if we even should see. Yes, it's exciting to shake up the MOBA formula, and maybe they could do something a little less crazy than like adding more lanes or taking lanes away or having no jungle. I feel like that just breaks too much from the MOBA formula, and at that point it's just going to be like Overwatch basically. But yeah, that was what he was looking for when SMITE 2 was coming out. What we got instead is a third-person LoL in this guy's opinion. Overall complicated item crafting store, physical and intelligence attacks that make each ability / autos react to different items, invisibility grass in the lanes making every character a potential annoying Loki player, and somehow slowing the entire game to a crawl and making every action feel not that important until endgame. So we'll go over these one by one. The overall complicated item crafting store, I don't really see this as a valid point in my opinion. I don't know why people are still complaining that the item store is too complicated. When the game was initially revealed, I could see why people might complain a little bit. You know, they haven't played it, they haven't had a chance to experience it, and realize that it is basically exactly the same as SMITE 1 store. It's really not that much different. yes, you're building from components, but ultimately you're still just going to the store and clicking on a tier 3 item and buying it. Like, it'll just buy the components for you. It's really not that difficult. And I feel like if you've played SMITE 2 for more than about 5 games, you've probably gotten very used to it. I got used to it immediately, pretty much. And granted, I'm not the average player. It probably will take the average player longer to get used to this kind of stuff because I grind this game for a job. But I still feel like it's going to be very easy to get used to. I don't think this is really a valid complaint, in my opinion. Physical and intelligence attacks that makes each ability / autos react to different items. This is just universally positive, in my opinion. Just because it's like League of Legends doesn't mean it's a bad thing. I think this is definitely an improvement. Intelligence and strength is like half the reason to actually play SMITE 2 over SMITE 1, you know. Otherwise, we're just getting SMITE 1 again on a new engine, but you lost all your skins and all your progress. Like, they do want to make the game different. They do want to make it worthy of the sequel title, because if we just get the same game again, but you've lost all your skins and your progress, what's the point, right? And strength and intelligence is one of the biggest things they've done to make the game more interesting, and I'm absolutely all for this. Invisibility grass in the lanes making every character a potential annoying Loki player. The grass, I've said this before, I'm indifferent to it. They could remove it if they want to, they could keep it if they want to. I think you can make some interesting plays with it, but it also can be really annoying to deal with. I wouldn't care if they removed it, I wouldn't care if it stayed, honestly. Although I will say, I think it should stay in casual modes. I think in casual modes, it's actually a lot of fun. In Conquest, it does make it a little bit annoying because of Conquest's slower pace, where you can just kind of like sit in bushes and be annoying. But I think, obviously, they haven't added any other casual modes yet, but I think it works really well in Arena. From what I've played of Arena in SMITE 2, I think the stealth grass is great, and they should maybe even expand the stealth grass in Arena a little bit. I think it makes it more interesting. But for Conquest, yeah, I could take it or leave it. If they remove it, I wouldn't care. And then somehow slowing the entire game to a crawl and making every action feel not important until the end game, this is definitely valid. The game feels very slow right now. The early game feels like you can't really get anything done. They did make the TTK changes, and I feel like as people get more used to the new systems, the game will speed up in general. I feel like at the moment, you know, people aren't used to it. We haven't had 24/7 yet, so people only get to play a few games a month. And what that results in is people not being confident in the new systems, not being confident in their gameplay, and not actually making those plays and not actually optimizing. You know, we've had a few tournaments, but there hasn't been that much interest in them. I feel like once we go 24/7, people can grind this game all the time. Content creators can start putting out actual guides, because at the moment, I'm not putting out SMITE 2 guides when we only have, you know, 2 days a month to be able to play the game. It's just not worth it. No one will watch them. But when the game goes 24/7, I'll start putting out guides and stuff. Other content creators will start putting out guides. We might get some actual, like, proper Pro League tournaments going on. And then at that point, people will sort of understand the game a lot better and know what they're doing a lot better, and that will actually speed up the game. But yeah, at the moment, it does feel pretty slow. This is definitely a valid complaint, but I don't really see how that is making it like third-person LoL. I mean, is LoL really slow and not important until the end game? I don't really know. But I don't feel like that is them trying to make the game like LoL. This is just like, you know, an unintended side effect of it being a completely new game. So he continues, SMITE is an action MOBA. It was the only successful action MOBA. Why in the world are aspects from an RTS point-and-click game being added? An RTS needs these features because there really isn't a lot to the gameplay besides strategy. You are not capturing the LoL player base, you are losing the SMITE player base. I expected SMITE 2 to be SMITE, just more so. Better graphics, better gods, updated map that changes how Conquest plays. What are the chances that SMITE 2 can change the item and intelligence physical system back to the SMITE style and lead into the action and skill shot component of the game? So I get where this guy's coming from to a certain extent. We all do just want SMITE but better. We want it to feel at the core the same, but I don't think his point is that valid, because I think at the core it does mostly feel the same. I think they've done a relatively good job, especially over the course of the like last few alphas, where they make it feel a lot more like SMITE in terms of like the core sort of like mechanics and movement and ability casts and auto cancels and stuff like that. And again, I feel like the intelligence and strength system, just because it's similar to something that exists in LoL, doesn't mean it's necessarily bad for SMITE. I think it's a good thing. I think it adds a lot of depth to the game. One thing that I will say is, like, they've floated the idea of changing all gods back to being only physical damage or only magical damage. With a few exceptions, I will be okay with that. You know, I think maybe a couple of gods that specifically have exceptions to that, but every single god is normally only magical or physical, would be a good idea. You know, at the moment, we have stuff like Certus 1 dealing magical damage and stuff like that. I feel like maybe some specific gods, that could be their unique trait, where, like, maybe they're a hunter, but they also deal a little bit of magical damage, like Neith or whatever. But when it's every single god in the game, and every single god does a mix of damage types, it just makes building defense really, really hard, and obviously it nerfs tanks, if anything, because you have to build, like, both kinds of defense in lane or whatever. And so I wouldn't be opposed to them bringing, you know, the majority, like 90% of gods back to only dealing one damage type, and have the multiple damage types as, like, a specific unique feature to certain gods that can be balanced a little bit more, sort of sensibly with those small section of gods, rather than every single god being able to deal every single damage type. But when you do that, you can keep the intelligence and strength system. You can still have people scaling off of different attributes, you just won't have them dealing different damage types, which I think is fine. I wouldn't be opposed to them doing that. Alright, let's move on to some comments. So I was confused by the store 2 at first, then I realized I could do the same thing as SMITE 1, look at the tier 3 items I wanted, click on them, and it buys the tier 1, tier 2 items I have the money for, no crafting involved. Yeah, exactly. I don't understand how anyone that has played SMITE 2 doesn't agree with this take. Like, I don't know how. I feel like the people that complain about the component system being too complicated haven't actually played the game. They've just seen it, like, showcased. Because when you actually play the game, you literally do the exact same thing as SMITE 1. It's not like you're buying, like, 15 different specific pieces and then clicking combine on them in the item store. You're just clicking the tier 3. Like, it's not any different to SMITE 1. The strengthening system was very much intentional and, as far as I know, well received by the community, so I highly doubt that will change. Same with the grass. I imagine the locations of the grass will change throughout. Yeah, if they do keep the grass, they'll shift it around like they always have done with shifting things around on the Conquest map throughout the seasons in SMITE 1. The grass has not been as universally well received as I've seen. I've seen very mixed opinions on the grass. Some people say they like it, some people say they don't like it. But yeah, strength and intelligence, I would say, generally has a positive approval rating in the community, so to speak. There are some people that are absolutely complaining about it, like this guy, but I feel like for the most part, people generally like it, and I feel like people will like it more and more over time as they get used to the system. Because yes, it's a little bit complicated as you first get into it, especially if you've not played a game like League or Dota. I'm not sure if Dota actually has this kind of a split or not. But yeah, if you've not played those kind of games, you've only ever played SMITE as your MOBA, which is pretty much me, to be honest, but I got used to the system relatively quickly. And again, I play this game for a job. I know way more about it than the average player. That's not to big up myself. That's to say, like, for the average player, it will take them longer to get used to this kind of thing. But I feel like they will. They will over time. And as you get used to it, you'll start to unlock the intricacies of it and feel like, you know, you're becoming a better player. You're understanding how this system works. And it's really rewarding, in my opinion. I think it's a great system. And he says, as far as pacing, that is obviously still a work in progress, as is the map. It's still an alpha and early alpha at that. Yeah, the pacing of the map, I feel like, can definitely be fixed over time, especially as we get into 24/7 and they start making, you know, bigger, consistent patches and getting more consistent feedback. Yeah, a game feels like it has no identity. It's trying to copy many League systems, but they are all worse. Shop is like the original League shop that was massacrated by players. I don't know if that's a word. If they wanted to copy League, we need the same recommendation systems they have. Yeah, item recommendations and things like that will definitely be an improvement, but it is super early alpha. They're expecting the people that are playing the alpha to be reasonably competent at SMITE 1 at least, and be able to understand these systems relatively well. As they get more new players on board, as they go like 24/7 alpha and especially 24/7 free to play, they should definitely have more of these systems available that are actually good. Items, passives are way less interesting than League. Hell, they are less interesting than the SMITE 1 passives itself. I feel like all the items aren't fun anymore. They're just huge stat sticks. This is a very valid point. The system is really cool, but they're not really doing that much with the system. I think there are some really good ones. Staff of Murden is absolutely sick to play with. Pendulum Blade is great. A lot of the support active items, it makes support actually kind of fun because you have a lot more that you can do with those. But there are just a lot of items, especially Solar Lane's item pool at the moment is absolutely hot garbage. They definitely need to improve on some of the items, rework some of the ones that are just uninteresting and not being picked up. Runes, 5 runes, 1 for each role. What a joke. League's runes adds a lot of depth and complexity, but it looks like the SMITE 2 counterpart only adds complexity and no depth. Kind of true. This is the first implementation of the system. I've said it before, but I'm hoping they will go a little bit more in depth with this rather than you just choose one passive and it's kind of basically just like the shard system in SMITE 1. Hopefully they will go more in depth with this. I feel like some kind of tree where you get like minor bonuses as you go down and then these effects are kind of like the bottom bonus, but make them more interesting as well. That would be cool. Here's the thing. 3 of the things you wanted just take time. It's an investment. A newer engine allows for all those, but the devs have to invest the time to get used to it. SMITE 1 took time as well. As for the last one, a lot of MOBAs have tried to be the one to update the formula. They all ended up dead in a ditch. This is kind of true. Yeah, we all saw like Gigantic. We saw Paragon sort of like all end up dying. Obviously, Gigantic I think is back. Paragon is back in the form of Predecessor, but not really doing that well. It's hard, dude. It's really hard to sort of really shake up the formula. Even SMITE 1 didn't shake up the formula. It just put it in third person and made it more action oriented, which obviously is a shake up in itself, but it didn't shake up the core formula of like a MOBA, you know, like 3 lanes in a jungle, go for the Titan, objectives and stuff like that. It's difficult to shake up such an established, rigid formula as a MOBA. Grass is whatever. The way items are built is not complicated in practice. Yeah, we've talked about this before. Short in SMITE 1, you theoretically bought a tier 1, then you had a choice of what tier 2 to upgrade it into, and then again for the tier 3s, but in practice, you just chose which tier 3 you wanted and clicked on its icon until you got it. Exactly. Makes no sense to me. It makes me feel like the players that are complaining about this system haven't played the game. You can still do that, except changing your mind halfway through is a valid strategy now. The new system also helps atone with stat blow. Strength and intelligence is a godsend. For one, all autos scale the same, 100% of strength and 20% of int. Simple, but the new system has so many implications for ability hunters, mage ADCs, healers, etc. that the old one just couldn't handle. Yeah, exactly. Even in this early stage of strength and intelligence, where they clearly haven't perfected a lot of the items and systems and scalings, it still feels so cool to be able to play with this kind of stuff and craft your builds and play styles. Like some gods can play, like for example, you can build Neith as like a kin size strength attack speed hunter if you want to, or you can build her as the ability nuke. Ability nuke seems to be better at the moment, but you can build her both ways. And Some gods are a bit silly with it. You know, like Anubis is 2 scaling with strength. Why? It doesn't really matter. But again, it's super early days for this system, and it's already really interesting. I feel like, you know, a year or 2 down the line, this system is going to make the game feel so much more interesting and in-depth than Smite 1 ever could. But alright, let's move on to the other post that we had here. This one. So there is a creeping sense of disappointment setting in. We are close to something fresh, new, and versatile for Smite 2, but people want to dumb it down before it's even out. So this guy's probably going to have kind of the opposite take to the previous one. I understand that not everyone is going to have the same opinions. There are legitimate concerns with the alpha, such as randomly resetting your settings. I've not experienced this one, but that sounds annoying. Janky gameplay that sometimes screws you over mid-fight. Yeah, there's definitely some jank and bugs. Overpowered items and characters that make you feel weak in comparison. I don't think this is really an issue for the alpha, in my opinion. Or at least for the timed alphas. I think once it goes 24/7, you do want to start focusing a little more on balance, because it's going to feel really rough to play the game 24/7 when everyone's just spanning the same, like, 3 to 5 meta picks that are completely way above everyone else, because that's kind of how it is right now in terms of balance. You just got some absolutely broken shit like Fenrir, Zeus, Hades, Neith, and then no one's going to play all the other garbage stuff like Bellona and Odin and stuff. Lack of impact or visual weight. This is a bit nebulous, but I kind of understand where they're coming from with it. It does sometimes feel like some ability animations and effects just don't really hit the same way they did in Smite 1. A store that will randomly break while you're playing. I've not experienced this. Superfluous controls when checking or changing abilities. Again, I don't really know what this means. Lack of player communication, making games feel like desert islands. This is definitely true. Hopefully they'll have a text chat in the game for like when it launches 24/7 alpha. Boring, simple gods so far. Absolutely true. The current god choices, I feel like they've played it really safe with. They've added a lot of Smite 1 sort of original gods and some of the more basic ones. Whereas I'm really looking for some of those more complicated characters or ones that can really utilize the strength and intelligence system really well. The gods are kind of boring at the moment. I'm all for criticizing the game so it's better. I also know it's pretty obvious that this is not a polished game, and even when Smite 1 was polished, it was still riddled with bugs just like the ones up there. My expectations have some elasticity. I just want a better, more expensive game. I assume it means expansive, and these growing pains that will change with feedback and experience. However, I keep seeing sentiments that Smite 2 needs to be just like Smite 1 gameplay loop-wise with all of its problems, and it's quite disappointing. The new strength and in system, which is literally the same as the magical physical system, just with like 1 or 2 extra steps. Yeah, I mean, it's basically the same as the magical physical system, aside from both gods can build both types, and it makes it a lot more interesting. Item system, which is a huge upgrade and literally the same at its core with like 1 to 2 extra steps. This is true. Invisibility bushes, yes, it's from League, but we did have the invisibility lanterns before. Yeah, and honestly, people did complain about them a little bit, but the bushes are much more insidious, I suppose, in the map. Like, they're much more widespread. You're going to find them everywhere, whereas the lanterns were only just like in certain areas of the jungle, and we had those in Smite 1. But honestly, I wasn't a massive fan of the invisibility lanterns in Smite 1 either. With bushes, I've said it before, but they could remove them and I won't care. A focus on Conquest as the main game. Yeah, they're definitely doing this at the moment. They have added Arena, but they're definitely focusing on Conquest quite hard, and I think it will probably be a while until we get another game mode that isn't Conquest or Arena. These are only good things that raise the overall skill ceiling of the game. If you just take the time to play and learn the extra steps, it's just like Smite 1. Yeah, the time is really the key here. You know, once we go 24/7 and people have the chance to play it and grind it for like several hours at once every single day, obviously you won't have to do that to get used to the systems, but you'll get used to them much faster if that's how you play Smite. You know, if you hop on for like 3-4 hours every single day, you'll learn the system within a week very easily. And of course, I and probably other content creators will be putting out guides once they go 24/7 alpha, because it'll probably be worth it at that point. At the moment, it's just not really worth it. People aren't going to watch them when they can only play like 2 days a month. These people are going to hamstring and pigeonhole Smite 2 into being the same simple, extremely limited and casual game it was before. People have a sensitivity to the topic in this community of casual versus hardcore, and I get it. It's condescending to one side, and to the other it's a limitation. Just look at the 9.5 discourse a few weeks ago. I do feel like there is a portion of this community that is averse to raising the skill ceiling of the game. This is definitely true. And the problem is Hyras have kind of written themselves into a corner here with this. They've spent years making Smite 2 very appealing to casual players. Well, not necessarily very appealing to casual players, but in a MOBA sense, very appealing to casual players. You know, Smite compared to most games is quite a difficult game and is quite not friendly to casual players. But in the realm of MOBAs, Smite is the most casual, friendly MOBA that exists. And with that, they've attracted a lot of casual players. You know, I think this has shifted over time, but like Arena is almost as popular as Conquest. And so you got to kind of like balance pleasing those kind of players and also pleasing the hardcore Conquest players that compose a majority of your like most dedicated fans. And they've kind of got to balance that. You know, do you want to continue catering to those casual players in Smite 2 to keep a lot of the existing Smite 1 player base, or do you want to go a little bit more focused on the hardcore, like try-hard Conquest aspects of things and potentially lose some of those casual players? You know, maybe they'll stick with Smite 1, maybe they'll go to another MOBA or whatever. But then maybe you can gain a bunch of new players that really want to get into a proper hardcore, difficult skill ceiling MOBA. It's a tough decision, and I don't really know which way they should go with it, to be honest. I think that's a decision that Hi-Rez really has to make and look at. You know, they have the internal numbers on how many people are playing Conquest, how many people are not playing ranks, how many people are playing Arena, all that kind of stuff. There's a difference between being accessible and being super simple or casual. Yeah, absolutely. You generally want a very low skill floor, but a very high skill ceiling. That is like the ideal system for this kind of a game. You want it to be very easy to get into at a basic level, but very hard to master. And that's why you have matchmaking. You know, even the people who are just getting into the game, they'll be playing with other people who are just getting into the game, and they won't just get completely Goomba stomped like you would in Call of Duty or whatever. And then those super high level players, they don't have to deal with all these casual noobs because they will get put in the lobbies with the other high-end try-hard players. We can all agree Overwatch is accessible, League is accessible, but they're in a sense harder than Smite, even while still being very accessible games because of the skill ceiling. Oh, League is definitely harder than Smite. League is far harder than Smite. But I would also say League has a much higher skill floor than Smite as well. You know, you would have like League skill ceiling up here and Smite skill ceiling down here, but then you would basically just shift both of those down. So League skill floor is like here, and Smite skill floor is like a little bit below League's. Even though they onboard quickly, they're very punishing games if you don't know what you're doing against someone who does. A game that is too casual like Call of Duty doesn't take this into account, and anyone can pick a meta class, camp in a corner, and kill you. No one really cares about the game competitively speaking because there aren't many ways to show your skill in the game. Anyone can get the streaks. I think Smite 1 is far too casual while still being the most accessible MOBA on the market. It's quick to learn, quick to play, smooth, appealing to the average gamer who's used to third person, very pretty, you don't have to pay, and doesn't require any prior history. But don't get it twisted, if you're on the Smite subreddit playing an alpha for a game with less than 100k current players at the moment with shit servers and random bugs, you are a hardcore player. Just because you choose to spend your time being hardcore in Joust, Arena, or whatever, it doesn't mean you're not hardcore, it doesn't mean you're bad either. And a lot of systems in Smite 1 arose from the viewpoint of streamlining and simplifying the genre, which is anything but simple to appeal to people that want a casual experience. This is not a casual genre, matches can be over 30 minutes long, and it rears its head later on in the game's life by having rigid roles, rigid balance, gameplay that's too forgiving, and an overall lack of variety and fun. We're just now getting back to fun gameplay. Yeah, so I generally do agree with what he said here. The game has definitely been dumbed down, and it's kind of pigeonholed itself into like this one lane where it's trying to like be a hardcore MOBA, but also trying to appeal to casuals to the point where like they're not really pleasing either side. You know, the game is too rigid and doesn't have a high enough skill ceiling and doesn't have enough depth for the hardcore players to really enjoy it, but then the skill floor is a little too high for like the really casual players to enjoy it as well. Looks like he's going to say that right here. Smite 1 exists in a state of limbo where it's an accessible game that can attract players with a fan base full of hardcore Smite players that can easily exploit holes in the simplified systems they've been playing for years, but don't want to actually have a high skill ceiling or a competitive game to learn the genre of game they're logging hours in. With new, fresh systems, we're starting essentially at ground zero. They can patch up the holes that Smite 1 had that they couldn't do because the game has existed for years that way. I understand new things are uncomfortable, but you grow from uncomfortable situations. Smite 2 should be its own thing, not a direct reskin of an old game with several issues already. So yeah, in general, I do agree with what he's kind of talking about in this post. Especially this final paragraph. Yes, it's going to be hard to learn. It might make you uncomfortable for like your first few, you know, weeks or months of playing Smite 2. But I think it's not going to be that hard to get used to for most people. There are obviously some issues with the game, but I think a lot of the things people are criticizing are like, oh, the game's too complicated. It's really not that complicated. I played a lot of Smite 2 and I've gotten used to it very, very quickly. And again, I'll say this for like the third time in this video. I know I'm not the average player. The average player is going to have a harder time adapting to these systems than I do when I have like 4,000 hours in this game. I completely understand that. But I really don't think it will be that hard for people to get used to this kind of stuff, and it will make the game so much better in the long run. But yeah, there you go. Just a couple of Reddit posts that drew my attention this week in terms of discussing Smite 2. You know, is it too much like League? Is it too difficult? Should they casualize it a bit more? Should they make it more like Smite 1? Basically, in conclusion, I think no, they shouldn't just make Smite 1 again. There's no point in doing that. If they just make it the exact same game as Smite 1 and they remove all of this cool stuff that they've added, like strength and intelligence and active items and stuff like that, if they just make Smite 1 again, but you lose your skins and you lose your progression, what's the point? You may as well just play Smite 1. I think they should stick with mostly what they're doing. There's obviously some issues and some things that do need to change, but I think they should definitely stick with a lot of the winning systems that they have in the game, like strength and intelligence and active items, and make it a truly different game. And I think in the long run, that will be the better call. People will get used to it. It won't be that hard. I think, you know, once this game's been out in 24/7 for like a year, people will completely dismiss these concerns and they'll be completely used to the new system. I just think at the moment, you know, when we only have a couple of days to play every month, people just aren't getting used to it quick enough. And hopefully 24/7 alpha will help with that. But yeah, that's my thoughts on a couple of these Reddit posts. Just thought I'd bring this to the second channel. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed my takes on these. Obviously, let me know your own thoughts down below. Do you think SMITE is do you think SMITE 2, sorry, is too complicated? Do you think it's too much like League? Do you think it should make it more like SMITE 1? Or do you think it should stick with the direction they're going on right now, making it a little bit more high skill ceiling, that kind of stuff? Yeah, let me know, and I will catch you guys for another one tomorrow on Into Games. Peace.